In this video, we'll continue working on the Penrose triangle shape and turn it into an infinite double Penrose triangle Mobius strip looking thing. If you haven't seen the first part where I animate the original triangle, then go check that out first over at the School of Motion's channel. Even though you might not be looking to create this exact animation, I'll go over a lot of foundational techniques that are helpful in any project. Prepare yourself, this video is going to be long, but I'll show you how I built this project from scratch, including the challenges I run into and how I troubleshoot them. After Effects is a very deep tool and it can take years to master. But if you're looking for a way to get to the next level as an animator, then check out the Advanced Motion Methods course that I created with School of Motion, where I teach you exactly how I've used After Effects on projects for some of the biggest brands in the world. And I'll share workflows that some of the best artists in the industry are using. Okay, now let's get started. Okay, here's what we're going to build. Let's start fresh and make a new composition. New Penrose. And let's leave it 4K, should be fine. Oh, and by the way, this is a little bit more advanced, so I'm not going to go over too much of the basics of After Effects. I assume you already know After Effects, and this is going to just be really helping you hopefully grow from that point. So here's my shape. I'm just going to select these three objects and use Overlord to push the shape to After Effects. And then I have three elements, so I'm actually going to focus on the brown one here at the top. Let's remove these for now because I don't really need them, because I could just duplicate this shape. I'm coloring this brown properly because I think this Illustrator file is like, it's got like print colors. So let's turn this off, and here I have two layers. One is the off state, and one is an on state. So actually I'm gonna grab, since I already have the on state, I'm just gonna grab the off state of this path. And it's basically the path being reduced to the line in the center here. And I can use that actually to animate this path. So I don't have to do that in After Effects. So let's search for path on this layer, set a keyframe, push it into the future 10 frames with Option Shift right key. And then here, I'm just going to make sure I have path selected, and I'm on a different frame. And then I'm going to go to Illustrator and then push this shape to After Effects. It's actually going to animate it for me, which is great because you can make this path much more precisely in Illustrator. So now that we have this, let's call that side 1. Just going to duplicate it and then create the other sides. So let's rotate this by 120. Make it red. This one as well, 240. And make that purple. That's animating. So what I need is, I need some kind of backdrop here. I'm just going to duplicate these layers. Take the original first layers and just remove the animation. So now we don't see anything because it's the same color. So I could either obviously search for color to change the colors here, or I could just rotate them another 120 degrees. So I'm just going to open this up, add 120 to it. So I could just do math in these little boxes, which is incredibly helpful. Great, and then that way it moves. So one thing that you could see right off the bat, and which will be a problem if we're exporting this for the web, for example, where you have all that resolution and frame rates, is that you could see these little artifacts here in the middle. Now, we'll get to that later because usually you'll clean up the animation at the end, because otherwise you're adding a lot of complexity in the beginning, right from the start. What I did is I actually created these little layers here that cover that up, which is just a really thin shape, but we'll get to that in the end when we're cleaning it up. Now, first of all, this seems a little low resolution, and it's because it's really small. So let's make a null, call that zoom, and attach all the layers to it. And then let's scale this up like 400%. That's not a good idea, is to just look at everything really high resolution, because then you could see that, you know, these artifacts are starting to get less if you work at it at a higher resolution. So I like to always work at sometimes like double the size of the size that I'll eventually need it at. So, all right, so now we got that. So the first 10 frames, it's doing that. Now, then at 1 second, I'm just gonna put a marker there with Shift 1, And that's where I'm going to have the other animation start, the Mobius kind of thing. So the first thing that I need is I need 2 of these shapes because it's going to be stretching out from the center. So let's take all these sides and duplicate them, move them up with Command-Shift right bracket. And let's give them a different color so I know which one it is. Then let's also create some sort of a grouping system for these by creating a null object, shape A and shape B. So then this could be the header of all these shapes, connected to that, and then make sure that shape A and B are connected to zoom, so we get this hierarchy. Shape B, these are all part of shape B like this. Because what I need to do is, if you look back at the storyboards, so when I looked at this transition, I had a feeling that this shape wanted to move outwards, from the center out, so that eventually it will like expand in this direction. So in order to do that, I need one, but I also need another shape here. So that's what I've essentially done here. So what we're going to focus on now is moving this to left and right. So first of all, I need to rotate this 180 degrees. And then, yeah, the shape updates. I'm just going to work at a little lower resolution here. Then shape B is at the bottom, because shape A is my main shape. It's like that. And then I'm just going to move them to the right. So open up the position property, separate the dimensions, because we're only going to use the X value here. Set a keyframe at 1 second here. One thing you could see now is that actually, this is always very handy, is that since these nulls are parented to the zoom layer up here, they are a perfectly 0 position. Whereas if they're not, you're working with these values. Now, if you're trying to move something out from the center to both sides, it's really handy to have them connected to another null that's actually in the center. Because that way, if I move this 300 to the right and this 300 to the left by minus 300, it's an equal number, right? So you can also like connect these. So if I only want to focus on one, I can connect this with an expression and type minus in front. Whereas if these weren't connected to the zoom, what would happen is that you have this weird number. So if this expression didn't work, so in order for this to be in the same position, this one needs to be at 3,120 and this one needs to be at 720, which becomes very hard to see if these are equal distance apart, which they are. So that's like a little trick that I use to make sure that it's easy to animate. So always work from the center, or depends. If it makes sense for your shapes, work from the center. All right, and let's keep this expression on, because what I can do then is I could just move this, and then the other one also moves at the same time. So now I need to move this out far enough so that these sides actually align. There's a couple ways I could go about that. So it's really hard to see if this lines up with this. So one thing I could do is, since these are connected to the zoom, I could just do a little trick and rotate this little 30 degrees, because I know that these are, this is a triangle. So, that way I could use maybe like a guideline like this and then find the center. But it becomes hard because like both shapes shift, so you have to keep updating this line. Another trick would be to, let's use this shape. And then let's search for the path of it. And then since this is animated already, I could just start to distort the path. So let's open up, let's use this tool, and let's just stretch this out all the way to the right. And actually, it's great that I've rotated this, because now I can use if I hold Shift, see how it kind of locks to the horizon? It wouldn't do that if I was at a 30-degree angle. So when I'm moving these points, I'm holding Command actually to grab them and move them. Otherwise, it's going to do a tangent thing. Holding Shift at the same time, will allow me to like move this at a very like precise horizontal angle, so I can stretch these out properly. So that will do. And then what I need to do for that is just set this to difference, because then that will allow me to sort of see through these shapes. Let's set this to full resolution. And this is where ideally you could go even higher resolution, right? So if I do this times 2, and then also go to my zoom layer, and then, you know, times 2 as well here. That will allow me to see much more detail so I can really tell if these are aligned or not. So the benefit of doing that stretching now is that I can see if these are lined up and at what value it needs to be. So it seems like 146.2, 0.3 maybe. It becomes really hard to preview actually now that it's such high resolution. So there's this little tool down here that allows you to cut out a little section. So I'm just going to do that here, and then it only has to render this. So what's cool is that, see, now it's a lot faster. So what's cool is that if I just drag this, it goes really fast, right, to line these up. But if I hold Command at the same time, you can it goes in increments of 0.10. So that's actually really, really close. I doubt you'll be able to see that difference, especially because I'm on 8K resolution right now, trying to make the shape. So I think 146.4, that's the distance that needs to be away from the center for these two to line up, if that makes sense. So if I turn this off, calculate, there it is. Cool. So now I know that these are lined up. I'm actually going to not use an expression here because I believe that if you send this to the web, it doesn't really like expressions. So I'm just going to turn this off. I'm removing expressions by Option Shift and then clicking. And then let's paste this here. And then that should arrive at the same position. All right, cool. So we just use the expression to just figure out where the center is. Now let's put this back. Let's make the composition 4K again, so we're not working with such a huge comp. So divided by 2. Then scale also divided by 2. There we go. And then this awkward shape that we just created, we could just get rid of this here. All right, so now we know that these are, and let's set this back to normal. Now we know that these are actually lining up. So then the first motion that would happen is that these two animate. So let's set a keyframe for that. And I'm going to push this out to the future because in the future I want them to be separated from, at this point, I want them to both be 0. 1, 2, 3. So let's do it over 1 second. So another thing I like to do is work in increments of 10, because that way it becomes, especially if you're working with 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, it becomes really easy to just like jump between keyframes. I also keep everything linear keyframes at the start because I just want to figure out motion. I'm not too concerned yet about like, you know, what the easing is going to be at this point. Once everything is built, that's when I'll focus on the easing. All right, so now we have this animation. You could see that we could see shape B already before it even starts moving out. So that's not a good thing. So let's add a scale keyframe by holding Option S. Again, Option Shift to the right will push that keyframe into the future. And let's scale this thing down a little bit so that it starts to disappear behind the shape, like that. And then I need to hide it also here in the middle. So I'm just gonna, grab shape from Illustrator. There's some hidden layers here, these polygons. And these are essentially just the center. Like if you look at the line mode with Command Y, you could see that, it's very hard to get the center of a triangle. So that's why I built this. I wanted to make sure I had a hexagon at the start because that would allow me to find the center more easily. It's right here. So in this case, I'm going to use that same shape, push it to After Effects. Here it is. Just going to use that to hide it. I don't think it has a fill yet, so let's add a fill to it. Let's make that white. And I can get rid of the stroke. So hide shape B. Let's make some more space. So that sits right below shape A, and it's actually attached to shape A, and I want to make it a different color so I don't get confused that that's one of the sides. All right, let's save our animation too. Can't forget that. There it goes. So now it looks a lot better. And notice it's starting to get a little heavy. So what I'm going to do is, since these three sides are the three sides that are animating in, they are effectively replacing what's behind it. So I could just get rid of these layers. I can cut those off because I don't need those anymore. Same for here, like that. And that will just make sure that After Effects doesn't have to render more than is necessary. Shift 2 to place another marker there. These markers really help, plus the keyframes itself really help. When you're scrubbing through the timeline, you can also hold Shift, and it will kind of magnetically, like, see how it snaps to those points? It makes for really quick moving between these frames, especially if you know, I know that 1, 2, 3 is going to be this keyframe, 3 down the road there is going to be that keyframe. So you can really quickly move between those. Okay, so now we got this animation. Now I need to find a way to build a bridge between this and that without people knowing that it's actually not possible to connect the two, because you can't really, like, the first thing I always try to do is find out a legitimate way that things can connect. But since we're dealing with impossible shapes, there's actually no legitimate way that you connect the two. So we need to somehow, like, fake that these are somehow turning into one shape. And you can use a couple tricks for that. Usually rotation moves are very disorienting and confusing, and the viewer can't really describe what just happened there when something rotates. You can hide a lot of, like, imperfections in rotation moves. Another thing you could do is build those imperfections in at the fastest moment that something moves, so that, you know, you can shake your hand, like, you can shake your hand and all of a sudden I stop shaking it and it's got one finger, whereas before it had two fingers. So, like, that's the kind of trick. It's kind of like a magic trick, right? But that's the same principles that we can use in animation, because I can start moving this thing really slowly and it still looks accurate, and then it moves really fast and I do the imperfections to make these two sides connect, and then at the end it, like, slowly, like, pulls apart and it looks like it's correct. So that's some of the techniques that we're going to be using to create this illusion and these connected. So one thing that will really help is doing more of these rotations. So let's duplicate some more of these layers. Let's duplicate this, move it to the top, trim it to the left, or actually not trim it, just move it, because it's got these keyframes on it. Then we know that we don't need these layers anymore. Then let's do an example where I change the colors instead of the rotation. So that's another way to do this. So you see this new shape coming in over here. So that should be the extended purple color, right? So then this shape should actually be purple. There you go. And then this shape over here that's growing should be the extended brown. So let's color it brown. And then this shape over here should be the extended red. So let's color it red. No, actually it's very messy, actually, how that animated out. I wonder if we shifted something somehow. Look, all these things are off. Let's see. Position, oh yeah, see? So that's another benefit. Since these are all connected to the null shape A, I can quickly tell if something is off center by just looking at the position, because the position should always be 0. So right now I'm getting these weird artifacts, and you could be like, oh, let's just keep working. No one's gonna see that. But no, people will see it. And working in a very clean and organized way can help you troubleshoot where these things are. So if I set this to 0, it should be fixed. Yeah, there it goes. All right, whew. When I was actually animating this, I looked at this and I was like, how many rotations do I really need to make this connection? So if I move these keyframes in 20 frames like this, you could see that this is not enough rotation to make a bridge here. I need to rotate it much more. And I actually figured out that I need to rotate it about 3 times. So let's do the same process 3 more times, and also do that for shape B, and I'll do that in a time lapse so you don't have to wait for it. Rotate these plus 120, plus 120, plus 120, move it to the top, to the right, plus 120, plus 120, plus 120, sure, plus 120. Cool. So, just to show you what I got now, I got these 2 staircases here that effectively makes 3 rotations each for these shapes. And this is just the right amount of rotations that I would need to connect and bridge these shapes. And if you look closely, it can be very hypnotizing, but look in the center, you could see that there are some lines here that are lining up. And those are going to be the points that we want to try to put shapes in. So if you look closely, this edge over here and this red edge over there, you know, they move at the same time, even though they're different parts of the shape. So that's where eventually like the bridge will happen. So now that I have this, let's start to try and connect these, which is the most difficult part. Now when we connect these, eventually the final shape will have this purple shape. Instead of going around the corner, it will have this purple go straight. And that's actually where the red color is. And then here, the red color is actually going to go straight here. And that's where the purple color is. So the colors here on the right will probably have to change to make this work. And another thing is, since now this is a Mobius strip, there should be an extra color, because otherwise there's going to be double colors. And you can see that in the storyboards as well. The 4th color was actually invisible. So that's kind of cool as well, to just do the same color as the background. So since that's actually a really visible shape, that's where I'll start. And I'll do it bit by bit. So I'm going to worry about how to fix the rest later. I'm just going to start with this one. So let's duplicate this shape. And it's part of shape B. So this is it, I think. Let's just duplicate this and put it all the way at the top for now, and then mark it yellow so it's something different. Let's make it blue, or yellow actually. There it is. And let's just extend these points out to the other side, see how far we can get. So actually, now that I look at it, we need to match this corner here, which is going to be impossible to do with just trying to make it line up with the tangent. It's not going to be as precise. So I actually think we also need this shape here, which will be part of shape A, which is this one. Yeah, it is this one. Cool. So let's also take that, make it yellow. Let's go into the paths of these and alter that. So right here, it's actually not handy that these are the same color because I can't see the path. So let's make this black so that it's easier to see. Yeah, I'm having trouble with this path tool for some reason. It doesn't, super annoying. Oh, there it is. Cool. So then let's get rid of some of these points because we don't need those. Because we're really just interested in this part that extends out like this. And then over here, we're also not interested in these points. I'm just going to remove those. And then, actually, I'll keep that. Was there another point here? Yeah, I might actually keep that one. So then we have a little straight section here. Cool, so now I'm going to extend these to try to bridge to the other sides. And we use this handy little trick again by tilting this whole piece of art over 30 degrees so that these become straight. And then let's focus on extending this. Oh, there you go. Well, if you hold Option, then it actually cycles through all the pen tool options. So that's cool. So there's a bug in my program for some reason that if I click here, that little drop down doesn't show up sometimes. Sometimes it does. But I just discovered that with holding Option, you can cycle through them. That's cool. All right, so let's grab these 2 points. I'm holding Command to select them, and then holding Shift to select another one. And then holding Shift again to make sure that they, see how they're kind of stuck to the horizon? I'm moving this all the way to the right here. And then I'm taking these, selecting these 2 keyframes. Well, they're not keyframes, they're path points, but I'm moving that also to the left. And then let's see what that does. Somehow it's pretty forgiving with the animation part of it. So one thing that I already see is that this doesn't connect entirely. Like, even though this lines up pretty well, it doesn't connect 100% at the beginning. It does connect 100% at the end because remember we lined this up perfectly. So part of the reason I think this happens, let's just set this to the difference so you can see the difference, is because it's scaling. And as shape B is getting smaller, it's obviously affecting the distance, between these 2 things, as you can see here. So one thing that I could try is actually to make it scale all the way up in the first 10 frames. And that actually resolves a lot, you see? Instead of this far away, it's now only this far away. So if I can do that, that's great. And then since these are linear keyframes, eventually I'll be using timer map to apply one set of easing to this whole move from 1 to 2. Since this is a pretty abrupt stop, I'm just going to add an easing to this with F9 so that it scales up and it appears from behind shape A. So they become the same size pretty fast after that. And then here, they line up pretty well, but I could potentially also use this to tweak them to be in the same spot. So let's see. Let's use a guide. And again, this will be happening at the fastest moment in the animation, so you probably won't see it. So I'm just going to move these a little bit up so that they're in the same place, so that when they animate out, see, now you can't really tell. So actually these lines are not straight anymore 100%. You can see a little bit of purple here. That might be a problem, but for now I think this would work pretty well as far as revealing that. And I'm not too concerned about this purple because they straighten out pretty quickly. So what I got now is that these two layers will provide me this bridge right here. So that's step one. Whew. All right, so then let's put this back to 0. Let's see what happens. Great. So now from here, it's really a matter of just trying to clean this up and making this transition as invisible as possible. So what I'm going to do is probably use this. Let's make this yellow again. Probably use this for the other side too. Let's see, let's make another null just to flip it around. So let's connect this to the null, rotate this 180 degrees like that, and then let's say this part should be connected to shape B, this part should be connected to shape A. Let's give them a different color so they're not going to get confused. So now I have that same bridge happening on the other end, which I might use or may not use because... So let's actually, before we use this, I don't think we use this shape. It's good to have there, but we might not use it. Let's first focus on making sure these colors line up, because I'm going to create the bridge between the top part of this and the top part of this. So let's select this shape here. Let's find it first. It's shape B. Then this is it, I think. There he goes. So this shape should be purple, which is going to be very confusing because the shape next to that is also purple. Let's actually turn these shapes off for now, because they're not gonna throw off the colors, because it becomes really hard to see at some point, like, well, what shape is part of what layer and what color does it have? It becomes really difficult. So eventually this becomes purple, and then this layer here needs to become red. This looks weird. It should be... Oh, it just looked like for a second this wasn't scaling from the edge, but it is. It's just because it's moving to the right. It just looks like it's coming from the center, this shape. So now let's figure out what the background color should be, because if this one is extending into red, then what's white in between here needs to be red. Okay, so this is where things might get really confusing for you if you're watching this, but stick with me here. And this is part of the big headache and why it's so difficult to build. So now red is effectively passing on its color to the edge right here, and it also means that the color that was below here should be brown then. Or actually, let's just ignore those for now, because I think just getting red and purple in the right place is going to really help. So this shape, instead of going around the corner, needs to go straight. So we've done this shape here, the yellow one, that's bridging the two together. I'd like to do that same thing for the brown shape here. instead of this going around the corner, this needs to go straight. So let's remove some of these points. Doop, 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 doop. Start working at lower resolution because my computer is like having a really hard time. So let's rotate this so it's a bit easier to manipulate the points. Let's go back to shape B. Let's grab this tool, stretch that out all the way to the end. Cool. What is that gonna do? That way. Oh, okay, so see that helps us connect these two red parts, you see? It might benefit from stretching this out a bit too. So right here, now this is growing like this. Still some other shapes. So we could do the same thing with this shape actually in the background. Oh, it's this one. First try. Let's see. This one also goes straight instead of making a corner. There it is. She could go straight further than that. And then that's perfect actually. Okay, so now we do the same with purple. So I'm just like, I don't know how to build this because every time I build this, it's probably gonna end up different. But I'm just looking and observing and seeing what makes sense and just approaching this step by step to figure out how this should work. Extend this as well. Both of these, please. Oh, there's probably multiple points at that same location there that are overlapping. So I'm just gonna drag both of these. Okay. Yeah, so now it starts to work a lot better. One thing that's interfering here is this brown shape. It's kind of angling in there. So let me see if I can find that real quick. That must be this one actually. Yeah, okay, so we either don't actually need this shape because it's covered up by the yellow one, so I probably turn it off for now. That way the transition looks one step more clean. All right, so now I want to extend this brown color and become the inside shape here. The layer that we almost, no, not the layer we just deleted, but the other one. I can't find it. The one that's like, there's supposed to be another layer in here to extend this. So let's try to find this layer first of all, and maybe it doesn't exist because that was actually the red layer that we just deleted those points from. So maybe we'll have to do a new layer. Let's actually reuse this layer that we have and just rotate it minus 120, and then it will become that shape. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's awesome actually, because we can recycle shapes. So even though this is growing, I want it to be the same color already, like that. And we're gonna have some issues, I think, with the color that's underneath here, but let's just first focus on this section here, that's correct, and then we can always overlay a different color here because you see red is moving there. Red is going from here to there, so we probably have a previous color, and that might be brown, who knows, that goes here and travels away from the edge. So one thing that I do see is that this layer might actually need to be lower on the layer stack. There you go. Yeah. Let's, sometimes when a layer is a bit more special, I add some asterisks to it, so I know that that's doing something. And then it also needs to exist before that. So here it comes out. Okay, so now that I have this, let's connect this brown shape to that. Yeah. So let's tilt it the other way. Plus 30. And then let's find shape A. Should that be? Let's find that side. Should be this side actually, right here. Let's add some asterisks to it. Then let's look at the animation for that. So ideally, at this point, this has become straight. So right here it's extruding out, but ideally I like to wrap around and make that straight. So let's actually just peek at the final result. It's like curving further to start making that connection. Eventually it straightens out like that. So that's what we're gonna try to create. Instead of going to this position, I'd like this to have some more points. So I'm just gonna add 1 point here, stretch that all the way out to here for now. Use a line like that, zoom in. Go like that, and then it doesn't snap. Okay, we'll do it the hard way. Here we go. So I'm leaving these tangents pretty long because I don't want it to result into a sharp point as it's moving. It's already pretty sharp. This is where your animation is going to be pretty forgiving because like this corner here looks terrible, but because they're the same color, you can get away with it. So this is actually rotating like this. And as it's coming in, it connects the two together. It bridges everything. You know, it does take a long time, and it kind of looks like, ideally I like this to happen a lot faster. I wonder if I could just move this forward, then it probably won't. Yeah, it would be ugly. So I probably have to put in another keyframe here to speed it up a little bit. So, you know, on the more we're in the middle here, say 0.3, this is the transition point where things are moving really fast because it has, you know, the easing will make sure that this and this side are going to take a little bit longer than the middle section. So the closer I could be to the middle, the more I can hide that imperfection there. So that's why I want to push this over a little bit. Actually, I wonder if I can just push it all the way to the end. Maybe not. I'm just going to do it for the majority of the way there. Actually, let's just push this all the way to the end. Who cares? You know, one thing that could happen too is that it could look like it goes too fast, where all of a sudden it just snaps in place. So I wonder if it does that or not. You know, you can get a little bit of that illusion right here, right? All of a sudden there's a color there. So this might not work. Yeah, so I'll probably make some kind of in-between state here so it doesn't jump there immediately, but still has a little bit of way to go. Let's just try that for now, and we can always tweak that later if it becomes an issue. Cool, so then at this point, it's just a matter of cleaning up more things that don't look right at this moment. Let's clean up this corner here at the top first, because all these lines need to become straight. So you can see how, you know, I'll highlight it with this tool. Whoa, okay. Ah, it's that snapping feature. The edge here, the brown edge, is becoming straight as it turns. So that's what we want to create for this purple and this red edge here as well, because instead of going around the corner, it needs to go straight. So let's find those shapes and make that adjustment. So let's turn this animation to the left so that these become horizontal. It's part of shape A, and then, oh, okay, so that's the red one. We need that at some point. Let's do that one to begin with then. Instead of going straight here, these should just go straight that way. Oops, and I can't go too far because then it reveals itself on the other side. Oh, that was easy. Okay, cool. So that one's fixed. Now we need to fix purple. Oh, hold on. That's ugly. Okay, so one thing that this reveals as well is because, you know, when I was at an angle like this, it wasn't so apparent to me that this was actually not horizontal. So now that I turned this -30, I can actually see that this is not, it's not 100% level. So let's go back to that shape and tweak that. Was it this one? Let's remove this tangent here and make it go straight. What does that do to my animation? There we go. That looks a whole lot better. Let's try to find this purple layer. so that we can fix that as well. Is that it? Let's see. Solo it. No, that's actually the brown one underneath. Remove some of these points one by one. Very slow. Here we go. There you go. Sweet. So this is stretching correctly, but now you can see that the brown's getting in the way. Let's see if I can just fix that by moving this layer up. This purple layer here also needs to be tweaked. This is the layer. So, you know, it does its animation, but after it's done with that, it needs to continue animating to become a straight line. So let's figure out how to do that. Weren't there 2 points here? Oh yeah, look at that. So I think at this point, what we just do is just grab one of these points, move it here, zoom in all the way to make sure it's very precise. Move this tangent in, and then that should make it curve like this, which doesn't look correct at all. I think I actually made a mistake. This is where I went wrong, because I remember removing these points, but I actually might need those points to fill in this gap here to make it seem like it's going around the corner, but at the same time it's stretching out. So I could either undo all that, or I could just recreate the shape. So probably be able to just take some other keyframes, paste it there, and it will have the same animation. Which shape was it? This one. So yeah, so just because all these sides share the same path animation, I could just probably just paste this, and then it will be back to normal like this. Brilliant. Okay, cool. So then now in this case, I want to actually make sure that I animate this correctly. So let's select only these and move that to the right. Okay, that's better, except that you can see this huge purple blob right here. Let's move these keyframes in, these points, like this. And let's see what that does. Well, it creates a very ugly edge here. So in that case, I'm just going to solve this with a mask. So if you click on this, and then you got to make sure you switch these two tools here, because you use the same tool for creating masks as you do for shape paths. So then you can click here, and let's move this so that it only shows this part. And for as far as like exporting this with body moving, the extension, and Lottie, I think they do support masks as long as you keep them simple and just keep them to add. All right, so hopefully this will, it's not fix our problem, because the mask needs to animate as well. So here in the future it works, here it needs to be on this edge. Cool, and now let's find how we're gonna fix this corner here, this red shape. I'm trying to find that layer. It's this layer here. What is that doing? So that layer should just be above the purple one. Ta-da! Because that doesn't require any weird corners and stuff like that. Yeah, so this way it feels like the purple is actually continuing to stretch out. And we'll fix the corner over there. So yeah, this edge looks a lot better. It looks like it's turning now. We fixed this section here. I think that's about what we can do to make that look like it's working. Then here at the bottom, we still got some issues. So let's animate this section here. Then this one needs to straighten out that way. So let's add some more points here, so that we don't disturb like this section here. And then I'm just going to stretch this out, rotate this thing 30 degrees. So yeah, I believe you can also move this up with the arrow keys. So once you have it selected and you need to move it just a tiny bit, Just select it with the arrow key and push it up. All right, that should be close enough. Let's see if it actually looks good while it animates. Yeah, I think it works because a lot of that again gets covered up by the same color. As long as this looks correct here, that it's like stretching out, becoming straight, and then it gets replaced immediately here and disappears. Back to 0. Let's see what else we need to fix. So then I think we need to fix colors because here purple is appearing. That means that this gap that we have here should be a purple background. So let's see if we can find that in shade B somewhere. Some of these layers are turned off. I wonder if it's this one. Yeah, it is. Okay, so this should now be purple. And that starts to disappear eventually. So then if the next color to appear is red, then the color behind that, this one, should be red. I hope you're following this. It's very confusing. So yeah, what happens here is that this background color here is red, and then this shape over here that's growing is also red, so it looks like it's passing on the color. That means that if this is brown, then this background shape here needs to be brown too. So let's find that shape. Is it this one? This one? This one, okay. Actually, that might actually be already the right color. So now effectively, red and purple are coming out correctly, and then it's being replaced by yellow here. Okay, here's a shape that actually starts growing. So this shape should be brown. That's what I know. Like this. So that shape is coming in, and this part here should be purple because the purple is moving over to this side, you see? So the new shape and color that's coming in should be brown. So let's take a look at the color of this. That's brown, that's correct. Then we need to find the background shape behind that. As soon as things become really complex, what I always do is just focus on a certain section of layers and just turn things off until I find the right layer. So now I find a gap here, so that means that I can turn on and off these layers to find the background. So then this is the layer that should be behind it, and that one should be purple instead of brown. There we go. And then when I turn these layers off, so that everything becomes visible again, now it looks correct. So the purple is coming all the way from the center. Okay, so now we get the purple all the way from the start, then it passes on its color here, all the way to the end. And the layer disappears after that, but we're going to stop it at 2 anyways, so that's fine. Okay, so then purple works, red also works because that comes all the way from the center. Now let's try to fix the edges here, and also this layer here that's red, it should not be red. It should be purple, I believe. Yeah, because it's the purple side is disappearing on this end, but then it's reappearing from the center. So let's find this layer. I'm actually going through layers with holding Command and then arrow keys. That way I can... And then when I see the edges line up, I get a clue that that might be the right layer. So let's color it purple. Does that look right? I believe so. There might be something here at the bottom that's not, that should be a different color. Let's just continue looking for what shapes are there. This is off actually. Let's turn that on. Let's make that a different color just to see what it's doing. Yes, I think there's another color underneath there. So that was the color that was there before purple. So that should then be red. But what we could do in this case is actually make that yellow because it gives a hint of the yellow that's about to come in here. So I'm just going to take this layer and color yellow. I'm just going to leave like a little comment here. Another thing you do have in After Effects is actually a comments column. So if you open this up, you get an extra field here where you can start writing stuff. Don't really use it as much. It looks very handy though, but I just use the layer names to write notes. So yeah, then yellow comes in really quickly just to show you that it's there, and then it reappears over here out of nowhere. And technically, like when I was building this yesterday, actually, I went down this other path where I made this yellow come in from the center here. So first, you see how the purple comes in like this here? I had yellow come in like that too, but it didn't work to have this be yellow because it would reveal that there's an edge here. So it really has to, this is the part where it breaks, right? Because this is the impossible part. And that's what's happening between 1 and 2. So hopefully the animation goes really fast here. So when you're easing something, make sure the fastest part happens around frame 20. It will be kind of hidden in that fast motion. And then the keyframe on the left here will have more easing than the keyframe on the end. Let's fix the bottom part here, and then I think we should be almost there. Oh, there's one ugly artifact actually here. The shape. Let's try to find that first. So let's look what's happening there. Yeah, so this may actually need to go all the way to the edge. Let's rotate this thing 30 degrees. It's getting really slow again. Okay, so let's move this point up here and take this tangent out. So for some reason, if you selected with this tool, it leaves the other tangent alone. So now we actually have a very sharp point that we see, which is not good. Let's make another keyframe here and try to curve this. This might turn out a bit sloppy here. I'm not sure if that was the right way to go about it. Let's delete it and look at this once more. So what's happening here is that it's creating this point. Ideally, it's curving a bit more, so I don't think that there's no other way, I guess, than to make an extra keyframe here, make it line up with that, and then curve this as much as possible, and then figure out where this should be in the middle for it to look great. So then now that at least that end part looks correct, but then it still has a sharp edge here. I think we can get rid of that. The reason why it's sharp is because it's moving towards a sharp frame here. So the more smooth I make this, the more smooth the other thing will be. So let's see if I can fake this. So now it's a bit more curved. Boop, and it's straightening out. Okay, so that looks a whole lot better already. I do see some issues here. It's revealing its color. Could be solved with a mask or just like I'm just going to take this side, turn it. That doesn't work because then it becomes a sharp edge again. Okay, so after this keyframe, I'm just going to make another keyframe and make this a hard edge because at least like we needed that curved edge here to make sure that this like looks like a curved angle as it's transitioning. But then once it's transitioned and that point has arrived at the edge of that other shape, that's when it can become straight so it doesn't reveal the color on the other side. Whew. All right, crazy. Looks better. So only thing now that I see that is weird is this thing over here looks like it's disappearing behind, and then this over here. So let's fix those. We don't need these keyframes, looks like, so we're just going to delete those and then make straight edge. Boop. Oh, I did it on the wrong frame. All right, so then what you do is just, I guess, move this here. And that's another benefit from working with linear keyframes, is because if this had easing on it, these two, and I meant to change the animation here, then, but I accidentally did it here and it created a keyframe, then if I want to replace those values with this keyframe's values, oftentimes the easing doesn't go through. So working with linear keyframes first is going to help with that too, because now I don't have to do any extra work. So let's stretch this out as well. There it goes. Fixed. Looks really good. All right, now let's fix the bottom part in a similar way. Let's turn this animation over. There it is. U for path. Why is there path all the way here? I guess it's not doing anything, really. Let's turn it off, see what happens. Oh, that's the inside part here. Is it? Yeah. Okay. Is it? Yeah, it is. Oh, so that should actually be brown. Ah, so here it kicks in. Ideally, we don't want that. So let's trim this layer, because everything looks good up at this point. Great, cool. So that still doesn't fix our problem, because we need to find this shape right here. So let's keep searching for that. This is it. Side 25. So hit U to reveal the keyframes, and then I think it's just a matter of stretching this out. Let's see. Let's take this keyframe and move it over here. Whoop. Yeah, we can just get away with it like that. Save, and then let's turn this back to 0. That looks pretty good right there. Wow, I can't believe that worked out. Yeah, I don't see anything that could be wrong. Okay, cool. So now that we got this fixed, what we know is that we have in our comp, we have in the first 10 seconds, we have this animation happening like this. Then from 1 to 2, we have this Mobius strip thing happening. There's some little artifacts. I'll show you how I solved this. Will probably take way too long to go through when I'm building it, but I'll show you what I did to get rid of those. But first, let's actually animate the cool part, because you want to make sure that before you fix any final details, that you first animate the final thing of how you want it to be, because those details might not be an issue at all, and then you're spending so much time fixing them. So the new Penrose shape, I'm going to take that and throw it in another pre-comp, and then that one will be called timing, because here we're going to take the timer map to make this all one move, because it's very hard to take, you know, all these keyframes and start applying easing to them. Like everything between 1 and 2 is one move. So applying easing to these is going to be very difficult, because how does this, you know, what should the speed be at this point? So we're just going to use a timer map. Click on this layer, Option, Command T, and then using Shift again to snap to those 1 and 2 points here. I could set keyframes for those. And this is also very handy that everything is on 10 frames difference, because I need the first 10 frames has that initial twist in there. So these keyframes will be all the keyframes I need to make the animation happen. So let's boost them out into the future a little bit, and let's create some more distance between these two as well. And I'm just going to apply some easing to this. But F9, and then I can hold Option and double click this. Actually, it moved the keyframe. Let's do it again. And then here, if I hit tap tap, it goes to the first influence field, and that's the field that, you know, the animation, that's the easing that will arrive into the keyframe on the left. So I'm going to set that to 88. Why 88? Because it's very fast to type. And everything here is like 2 taps. So I tap twice, I hit the tab key twice, and then I type 88, hit the tab key twice, type 66, and that will give a very nice easing to this. Now I might decide it goes a bit fast, so I could increase the speed, the distance between these. That's better. And then I could go into the graph editor here, zoom all the way in, make this larger by hitting the tilde key. And then there's all these cool little tricks I can do. So since this will be 60 frames per second for on the web, it's gonna, you're gonna see things move really smooth. So I'm just gonna add an extra keyframe here to make even more easing than you could possibly do using the tangents. So here I'm just gonna move this up. Seeing that it kind of levels this out really gradually. So make sure you don't overextend it, because then it does some weird stuff. So yeah, really make sure you get the most height you can get to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then zoom all the way out. And that way it should come to a stop even more gradually. And you can make that even more dramatic by stretching this all the way out to the right. So then it will take like quite some time to actually like just finish at those last pixels. So you could see that happening here too, right? I wonder if it's going to play back at full resolution. Barely. Okay, so let's go back to third. But you could see here, even in this, in this section, we're not moving a whole lot, but, it's very subtle. So that's how you can add very subtle animation to things. But in this case, I'm just going to keep it simple. All right, let's also do that with the other keyframes. This is the Mobius strip move. Now, for this, I'll use a script called Keysmith. There's lots of really good easing scripts out there. This is certainly not the most modern one. This one I've just been using from the start, so that's why I'm using it. I'm very used to how it works. So I just click this play button here, and it will apply the easing to it. So now when we take a look into keyframes, it has the same easing there. In this case, I wanted to start slow, because remember, the part that we're rather not see is happening somewhere on 2/3 the way. So I want to make sure that, if this is 1, 2, 3, I want to make sure that this roughly here is going to be the fastest point. So if I look at this, the easing actually has 66 in and then, or out, and then 88 in. So I actually want to flip that around. So I have a different settings here. Let's apply that. So that's pushing it closer to that. But I'll probably push it even more. And again, you could use that extra keyframe trick. Here at some point, the curve might not want to extend even further than the other keyframe. So at that point, you might need another keyframe here to create more curve, and you push that over with option left and right key, just like we moved the keyframes 10 frames with option shift right key. Okay, so now the fastest part of this animation should be over here somewhere, and that's where this yellow thing appears. So hopefully that will hide most of the trick, right? So you see it move, and you're like, everything looks fine. And then at the fastest moment, all of a sudden this extra element comes in out of nowhere. But then here, it's already just so far established that it looks right, and then it just continues into the perfect form. You're like, wait, where did that come from? It looked right, but it shouldn't be. So cool. That's some animation here. And then another thing that I did in the original one was actually animate this back. So let's copy and paste these keyframes. What you can see now is that we get a keyframe mess because we need to flip these around. So go to keyframe assistant. Here, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. And that will, create some really weird artifacts. Okay, so this is crazy. I've actually never seen this happening, and I'm not sure why it's happening, but the way to fix it is to not use continuous rasterization. Oh yeah, to use continuous rasterization, because then it's probably some kind of weird bug that it breaks the layer up like that. So you want to have this on anyways, because then it's going to come through with the sharpest shapes. So like when I first ran into that, I was like, why is that happening? Okay, so now this is going back. So it's animating out and then back in. And then in order to make this loop, we need different colors, right? So I'm just going to rotate it like this. And in order to match the other colors, let's duplicate this really quickly so we can see what colors we need to match. Oh, I actually moved the original one. So we need to rotate it so much that we match the other colors. And I'd like to rotate forward, so I might have to make 2 turns. Yeah, that will line it up. So 240. And then let's make that happen at the same time that it's moving back in. But obviously we don't want to make it move so weirdly. So what I'm going to try to do is match the same motion here. So this is where it actually starts to animate. So let's move this keyframe over here. And now it starts to collapse back in. But let's take the same easing as we have here and apply it to our rotation, which is difficult because we have this extra keyframe here in the middle. Maybe we can ditch that, or actually we could leave it. Let's just make a similar setup. So we select the outer 2 keyframes, and then there's this tool called ease copy that you can use to copy the 2 keyframes, and then select 2 other ones and apply the easing. So that will give us a roughly the same thing, except that we're missing that keyframe value in the middle. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it at this point where that rotation should be. So let's create a keyframe. And then now that I have a third one, let's select these 3, copy, and paste that on these 3 keyframes. And it does something really weird. Maybe we should just get rid of this keyframe altogether. Let's just make it simple and apply easing to this. Make the normal easing. So now it just does this. And then I like it to not rotate as much when it's here. So I think in the original example, I had this taking a lot longer for it to actually rotate around by adding an extra keyframe. Yeah, so there's all kinds of ways you can go about it. Here's some examples and kind of freestyling how, improvising how to do this. But yeah, you can get the project files as well and then see exactly how it's done. Timing for the triangles. This is how it's done here. So I did have that extra keyframe in the middle. I also started the rotation a little bit earlier here so that it starts to rotate. Oh, it's actually going the other way. That may be why it's rotating so much. Okay, so yeah, I actually rotated it backwards, this one and this one. So yeah, obviously many ways to go about it, however you like. All right, let's save. Oh my God, we haven't saved the project at all. See, like this is an issue. I've been working in programs like Final Cut Pro X, for example, where the project saves itself automatically. You just forget to save whenever you come back to After Effects. But yeah, make sure you save along the way. Sometimes you can get so into it that you forget it. Let's actually look at some of those details. How do you get rid of those? So it's very frustrating because I've put these shapes at like 100% of the same location, but because of the anti-aliasing of, converting this to pixels, it shows the color underneath, especially if it's a lighter color and a darker color. So the way to properly get rid of that on a 100% detail level is in the following way. So what I did here is I have an extra group in here. It's called covered line. So the way I made that was just to select one of these shapes, and then the part that's revealing the issue is this line over here in the middle. So first I'm going to try to isolate that line. So I'm just going to get rid of these points, and now I have a line. So in that case, I'm just going to hold Shift X to switch the stroke and the fill, and then keep it at 1 pixel, because 1 pixel should be enough to cover that line up. And especially if we blow this up to 4 times the size, as we did in After Effects, then it should be way big enough. So at that point, this has a thickness to it. So what we could do is we can go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and now this stroke has become a shape, a very thin shape. But this way, we could... and it was actually a good idea to leave this in the correct position. So ideally you do this where the shape is, and then what you'll have to do is I'll do it over here to the side so you can see it. But at some point, either the right side or the left side is going to overlap with the next shape that you don't want it to overlap with, so you'd have to like smoosh these together, you see? Like you have to like make them go to 1 point. And then same for on the other side, so that eventually you end up with something like this. You could see that I've done that here. So these points, it's not going completely to the other side, but it's going in enough not to bleed over into the other color. And here as well, it gets thinner at the end, so that when, bad example actually, this should be more like this, right? So if you want to do it in perfectly, you do it like that. But here's the trick, you don't see that, and the reason for that is because if I show you how I've covered those up. So in this composition, it's the same thing that we just built. All the orange layers are the layers that fix those gaps. So let's take a look at these first ones here. If it wants to preview, if I turn these layers off, you could see that these little gaps appear everywhere. So I turn them on, and then it covers them up properly. So you import them, make sure they're in the right position, attach them to shape A or the zoom, and then, yeah, these should actually be attached to shape A, but I guess zoom works as well. So then once they're here, right at the moment that the shape completes and the artifact is not visible anymore because the shape is just there and it shows no gap. I mean, it probably shows a gap between these colors, but you can't really see it because there's a white background. Right when that happens, I turn off the layer. Yeah, so at the moment that this keyframe becomes the next frame, these layers are not visible anymore. And the same for over here, you could see the details here that as soon as this frame becomes a reality of the shapes being in the right exact position, it disappears, the fixed thing. But then as soon as it starts moving again, then the fixed layers become visible again. You should really just look at your animation very closely and see if you have artifacts and go and fix it that way, because there's sometimes no way of telling like what the right position is for these layers. So that's what you have to do. So here I saw some weird stuff. So those are the things to look out for, and then go and fix those. Eventually, everything will look complete. All right, I hope you liked that tutorial. Let me know what you think about this style of tutorials that run a little bit longer, but are just more like looking over the shoulder. Because if you like them, make sure to subscribe to this channel and also like the video, because that gives me an indication that you want more of these videos. And then whenever I have a moment of time and an interesting project, I could potentially build it and record it as well to show you how it's done. There are many shapes that you can use this trick with, so I'm curious what version you'll come up with. If you happen to post this on Instagram, then please hashtag it with advanced motion methods so I can check it out. The download link with the project files are in the description of this video, so check that out to get started. And if you're ready to deep dive into After Effects workflows that some of the best artists in the industry are using, then check out Advanced Motion Methods from School of Motion. Thanks for watching, take care.